Ah, yes. Come closer to the fire, my friend. The night grows long, and I find myself in a mood for telling. You have heard much of elves, I suspect. And perhaps you have wondered about the other free peoples who walk beneath the sun and stars. But tonight, let me speak to you of men, the second children of Ilvatar, the followers, as the elves named them, a people whose story is, in many ways, the most remarkable of all, for their tale is one of extraordinary heights and devastating falls, of courage beyond measure and folly beyond reckoning. You see, to understand men, you must first understand something of their nature, something that sets them apart from all other peoples in this world. The elves are bound to ardor until the end of days. Their spirits, when their bodies fail, journey to the halls of Mandos and in time return, walking once more under the stars they so love. Men are different. They were given a gift by Ilvatar himself, a gift that even the Valar do not fully comprehend. Men are mortal, yes, but their spirits do not remain bound to this world. When they die, they pass beyond the circles of the world entirely, to destinations unknown even to the wisest. The elves call this the gift of men, though in darker times. Men themselves came to see it as a curse, a doom rather than a blessing, and therein lies much of the tragedy I shall relate to you tonight. Men awoke in the east of Middle-earth, in a time when the world was still young by the reckoning of the elder days, yet already ancient beyond your imagining. They woke when the first sun rose over the world, and they were afraid and confused, for they found themselves in a land already inhabited, already shaped by powers they could not comprehend. The Dark Lord Morgoth, who had been cast out from the blessed realm long before, had established his dominion in the north, and his shadow lay heavy upon the lands where men first opened their eyes. Now, in those earliest days, men were divided and scattered. Some fell under the shadow almost from the beginning, seduced by the lies of Morgoth's servants or simply broken by fear and despair. These became the ancestors of many peoples who would later trouble the world, though even among them I have seen nobility and courage shine through in unexpected moments. Never write off any kindred of men entirely, my friend. That is a lesson I have learned through long ages of walking among them. But there were others among those first men who resisted the darkness. They heard rumors, you see, rumors carried perhaps by wandering elves, or perhaps whispered in their hearts by powers they did not understand. Rumors of light in the west, of lands free from shadow, of peoples who walked in the starlight and sang songs of beauty and joy. And some of these men, the bravest and most curious among them, began to journey westward, seeking that light. This was no small undertaking, you must understand. They were abandoning everything they knew, journeying into wilderness that stretched for hundreds of leagues, facing dangers at every turn. Many fell by the wayside, many turned back, but some pressed on, generation after generation, their descendants continuing the journey that their ancestors had begun. These were the Edain, the fathers of men as they are called in the histories, though perhaps it would be more accurate to call them the fathers of a particular line of men, those who would come to greatness in the West. The journey of the Edain took many lifetimes of men. Think on that for a moment. Your grandfather might have begun a journey that your grandson's grandson would complete. Such was the determination of these people, such was their hunger for light and freedom. And when at last they crossed the Blue Mountains, when at last they entered the lands of Beleriand, where the elves had established their kingdoms, it was a meeting that changed the course of history. The first of the Edain to enter Beleriand was Bi, or the Old, and he led his people into the lands of the elf, Lord Finrod Finnegan. Now Finrod was of the Noldor, those elves who had seen the light of the two trees in the blessed realm before their destruction. And he was fair and wise beyond the measure of most. He came upon Beor's people when they were encamped by a river, and he heard them singing around their fires in a language he did not know. For 3 days he watched them in secret, marveling at these strange beings who were so like the elves in form and yet so different in nature, and then he took up his harp and began to play. Imagine the scene, my friend. These weary travelers, far from home, camping in an unknown land, and suddenly hearing music of such beauty as they had never dreamed possible. The then fell into a deep sleep, enchanted by Finrod's playing, and when they woke, they found him sitting among them, no longer hidden. They were afraid at first, as anyone might be, but Finrod's man was gentle and his face was kind, and Beor, looking upon him, is said to have believed that he gazed upon one of the Valar themselves, such was the light and majesty that surrounded the elf lord. From that meeting came a friendship that would endure through all the dark years that followed. Finrod taught Beor's people, learned their language even as he taught them his own. And when other Edain came into Beleriand, they too found welcome among the elves. 3 great houses of the Edain established themselves in Beleriand: the house of Beor, dark-haired and grey-eyed, loyal and steadfast; the house of Haleth, a fierce and independent people who kept much to themselves; and the house of Hader, golden-haired and tall, mighty warriors who would produce some of the greatest heroes of that age. These 3 houses joined the wars against Morgoth, fighting alongside the elves in battles whose names still echo through the ages. The Dagor Bragollach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, where rivers of fire consumed the northern lands, and many brave souls fell. The Nirnathon Odiad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, the greatest and most terrible of all the battles fought against Morgoth, where treachery undid what Valar might have won. In these conflicts and many others, men proved their worth, demonstrating courage and loyalty that astonished even the elves. But it was in smaller deeds, perhaps, that the true nature of men was revealed. Let me tell you of Beren, son of Barahir, who was of the house of Beor. Now Barah had been a great friend of Finrod Felagund, saving the elf lord's life in the Dagor Bragollach, and Finrod had given him a ring as a token of eternal friendship. But when Morgoth's forces overwhelmed the lands of men, Barahir was hunted and betrayed and slain, along with all his companions save one. That one was Beren, who escaped alone into the wild. For 4 years Beren lived as an outlaw in lands overrun by evil, performing deeds of such valor that even the servants of Morgoth learned to fear him. But at last he was driven forth, and he wandered through dangers beyond imagination until he came to the hidden kingdom of Doriath, where dwelt Thingol the Grey King, and his queen Melian the Mayor. And the Baron beheld Eldru Thien Ting Veal, the daughter of Thingol and Melian, and she was the fairest being ever to walk beneath the stars, and he loved her. This was no small thing, my friend. Elithien was of the highest lineage of both elves and Maiar, a princess of surpassing beauty and power. Beren was a mortal man, a hunted outlaw with nothing to his name but his father's ring and his own courage. When Thingol learned of their love, he was wrathful, and he set before Beren a task designed to be impossible, a task meant to send this presumptuous mortal to his death. Beren was commanded to bring to Thingol a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth himself. Now the Silmarils, you must understand, were the most precious objects in all of creation. They were 3 jewels crafted by Ephennor, greatest of the Noldor, and they contained within them the light of the 2 trees, theirs that had illuminated the blessed realm before the sun and moon were made. Morgoth had stolen them and set them in his iron crown, and he guarded them in his fortress of Angband with all the power at his command. No army of elves had been able to breach those defenses. No power in Middle-earth seemed capable of wresting those jewels from the Dark Lord. And yet Beren accepted the quest. What followed was a tale of adventure and sorrow, of heroism and sacrifice, that I could spend many nights relating. Suffice it to say that Beren did not go alone. Finrod Felagund, remembering the debt to Beren's father, joined him along with 10 loyal companions. They were captured by Sauron, who was then the chief servant of Morgoth, and imprisoned in his dungeons. One by one, Sauron sent a werewolf to devour the prisoners, seeking to break them and learn their purpose. One by one, Finrod's companions died, and Finrod could do nothing, for Sauron's power bound him. But when at last the wolf came for Beren, Finrod burst his bonds through a final effort of strength and will, and he fought the wolf with his bare hands, slaying it even as it slew him. Thus died Finrod Felagund, an elven king, for the sake of a mortal man. But Elthing came to rescue Beren, for her love was as strong as his. Together they entered Angband itself, and through Eluthin's enchantments they passed all the guards and defences, and came before Morgoth on his throne. There Elthing sang, and her song was of such power that even the Dark Lord was lulled into slumber. And Beren cut a Silmaril from the iron crown the knife, and they fled. They nearly escaped. They were at the very gates of Angband when Carterath, the mightiest wolf that ever lived, barred their way. Beren held up the Silmaril, hoping its holy light would drive the beast back. But Carterath was mad beyond fear. He bit off Beren's hand at the wrist, Silmaril and all, and swallowed it. The holy jewel burned the wolf from within, driving him into a frenzy of agony that sent him rampaging across the world. In the end, Carterath was slain, but Beren was wounded in the hunt. He died in Elduthain's arms, having fulfilled the quest that all had deemed impossible. He had indeed taken a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth. The impossible task was done, but the tale does not end there. Eluthain, in her grief, let her spirit leave her body, and she came before Mandos, the judge of the dead, in his halls beyond the world. There she sang to him, the most sorrowful song ever heard in Arda, and her song moved even that stern valor to pity. He brought the matter before Man, the elder king, and a choice was offered to Eluthain. She could be reborn among her people and forget Beren, or she could become mortal, accepting the fate of men, and return with Beren to Middle-earth to live out a brief span of years together, before passing beyond the world forever. She chose mortality. She chose love. And from that choice came a lineage that would shape the history of Middle-earth for ages to come. For Beren Elthing had descendants who carried within them the blood of men, of elves, and of Maiar. Remember this, my friend. Remember that the greatest of the heroes of men often had more than mortal blood in their veins, and yet it was the mortal part of them that often proved the most heroic. Of Tor I should also speak, for his tale runs parallel Beren's in many ways, though its ending was different. Tor was of the house of Hador, the golden-haired people, and he too walked a path appointed by powers greater than himself. He was guided by Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, to the hidden city of Gondor, the most beautiful and mighty of all the elven realms in Middle-earth. There he wed Idril, the daughter of King Turgon, and their son was Ego-Rendil the Mariner, who would one day save the world. But Gondolin was betrayed, and Morgoth's forces came upon it by surprise. The fall of Gondolin was a tragedy beyond words, the destruction of the fairest thing in Middle-earth. Yet Tor and Idril escaped with their young son, and when at last Tor was old, he built a ship and sailed into the west with Idril, and it is said that he alone of men was admitted to the blessed realm, to live among the immortal elves. But that was a special grace, given for the great deeds he had done, and the mingling of his fate with the elves of Gondolin. Eda-Rendil grew to manhood among the refugees of Gondolin and Doriath, for both realms had been destroyed by the malice of Morgoth. He wed Elwing, who was herself descended from Beren and Elgi-Thain, and thus in Rendil and Elwing were joined the two great houses of the half-elven. They had two sons, Erend and Elros, names even you must recognize, my friend, for they are woven through all the histories that followed. Rendil was a mariner, driven by a desire to find the blessed room and seek aid against Morgoth, who seemed unstoppable. The sons of Nor, bound by their terrible oath to recover the Silmarils, attacked the haven where Eda-Rendil's people dwelt, seeking the Silmaril that Beren had won and that Elwing now wore. Rather than surrender it, Elwing cast herself into the sea, but Ulmo saved her and transformed her into a great white bird, and she flew to Rendil's ship far out upon the ocean, together bearing the Silmaril. Rendil and Elwing sailed into the west and found the blessed realm, which no mortal had ever seen. Rendil spoke on behalf of elves and men alike, pleading for aid against Morgoth. And the Valar heard him, and they mustered their host, and they came to Middle-earth in a great war that broke the world. The War of Wrath, it was called, and it lasted for decades. The armies of the Valar, joined by many elves of the blessed realm, fought against Morgoth and all his servants. Mountains were thrown down, seas flooded the lands, Fire and lightning scorched the earth. In the end, Morgoth was defeated, cast down, and thrust through the door of night into the void beyond the world. But the cost was terrible. Beleriand, that fair land where elves and men had lived and loved and fought, was destroyed. It sank beneath the waves, lost forever save in memory and song. The surviving Edain, those men who had fought so valiantly through all the wars, were left homeless and weary. They had given everything, sacrificed everything, and now the land they had called home was gone. But the Valar remembered the Valar and their faithfulness. A reward was prepared for them, a gift greater than any given to men before or since. Far out in the western sea, but not so far as to reach the blessed realm itself, the Valar raised up a new island. It was larger than any island that had existed before, a great star-shaped land that rose from the waves like a mountain. Its highest peak, the Meneltama, the pillar of heaven, stood at the center, and from its summit one could see far to the west, where the light of the blessed realm glimmered on the edge of sight when conditions were right. This was Ena Mena, the land of the star, the gift of the Valar to the Edain. To this island came the survivors of the three houses of the Edain, and there they were given a new beginning. Their lives were lengthened far beyond those of other men, 3 times the span of lesser mortals and sometimes more. They grew in wisdom and stature, becoming the mightiest men that ever walked the earth, and to rule over them, a king was appointed from the line of Eärendil. But here is where the tale comes complicated, my friend, for you remember Eärendil and Elwing had 2 sons, Arund and Elros. Because of their mixed heritage descending from elves, men, and even Maiar, they were given a choice that no others have ever been offered. They could choose to be counted among the elves, immortal and bound to the fate of the world, or they could choose to be counted among men, mortal but free to pass beyond the circles of the world when their time came. Arun chose to be counted among the elves. He remained in Middle-earth and in time became the Lord of Rivendell, the last homely house, where he still dwells, keeping alive the memory of the elder days. But Eros chose to be counted among men, and he became the first king of Enumena. Now do not think that Eros made his choice lightly, or that it was somehow a lesser choice than his brothers. Eros understood something about the nature of men that many elves could never quite grasp. He understood that there is a glory in mortality, a preciousness to brief life that eternal life can never possess. The elves fade, you see. They grow weary of the world, weighed down by the accumulation of memory and sorrow. They become bound to the past, unable to fully embrace the future. But men can always begin again. Men can always hope for something new. And when their time is done, they are freed from the world entirely, going to destinations that even the Valar cannot imagine. Eros took the name Tar Minyatar when he became king, which means high first ruler in the elven tongue. For the Enumenoreans loved the language of the elves and used it for all matters of ceremony and importance. He reigned for 410 years, longer than any king who came after him, and when he died it was not from illness or injury, but simply from a weariness of living. He laid down his life willingly, passing from the world in peace. And this became the custom of the kings of Enumena in the earlier years, to surrender their lives while they still had strength and wisdom, rather than clinging to existence until decrepitude took them. The early centuries of Númenor were a golden age such as men had never known. The Enumenoreans built great cities of white stone. They cultivated gardens of surpassing beauty. They became master craftsmen, creating works that rivaled those of the elves themselves. And they became the greatest Marild had ever seen, for the sea was in their blood, the inheritance of their ancestor Eärendil, and they longed to explore the wide waters that surrounded their island home. They built ships of a kind never seen before, tall ships with white sails that could journey for hundreds of leagues across the ocean. They discovered Middle-earth again, for though they knew their ancestors had come from there, the land itself was unknown to them. And when they came to the western shores of Middle-earth, they found men there, the descendants of those who had not journeyed to Enumena. living in primitive conditions, frightened and diminished. The Númenóreans were like gods to these lesser men, tall and fair and strong, arriving in great ships, bringing gifts of knowledge and craft. Some accounts say that the primitive men of the Middle-earth believed the Númenóreans to be Valar, or perhaps the spirits of the ancestors returned from death. The Númenóreans taught them many things: agriculture and husbandry, the working of metal, the building of stone structures, the arts of writing and medicine. And for 8 centuries, the relationship was good, the Númenóreans giving freely of their wisdom and asking nothing in return save friendship. They established havens on the western coasts of Middle-earth, places where their ships could anchor and their sailors could rest. They planted gardens there and built towers from which they could watch the sea. And they made friends among the elves, particularly those of Lindon, the realm of Gil-galad, the last high king of the Noldor in Middle-earth. For the Númenóreans remembered their ancient alliance with the elves, and they honored it. Indeed, the friendship between Númenor and the elves was a source of great enrichment for both peoples. Elven ships came to Númenor bearing gifts, birds of sweet song, flowers that bloomed in colors unknown in the island, and most precious of all, a seedling of Celeborn, the white tree that grew in the elven haven of Tol Eressë, which was itself descended from Telperion, one of the 2 trees of Valinor. This tree was planted in the courts of the king in Ar-Melos, the capital city of Númenor, and it was held sacred. As long as it flourished, the people believed Númenor would flourish also. But there was one thing the Númenóreans were forbidden to do. They were not permitted to sail west beyond the site of Númenor toward the Blessed Realm. This was called the Ban of the Valar, and it was a prohibition that would in time become a source of great resentment. You must understand, my friend, that the Númenóreans could see the Blessed Realm, or at least the light of it, from the summit of the Meneltarmal on clear days. They knew that the land of the immortals lay just beyond the horizon, a place of eternal peace and beauty, where death itself had no dominion. And they could not go there. They, the mightiest and noblest of men, favored above all other mortals, were still forbidden from the one place that seemed to hold what they desired most. For what did they desire? As the centuries passed and the glory of Númenor grew, the Númenóreans began to desire immortality. Not the gift of men, the passage beyond the circles of the world, but the life of the elves, an existence that would continue forever under the sun and stars. They looked upon the elves who visited them, ageless and beautiful, and they felt the first stirrings of envy. They looked to the west, where the light of the blessed realm beckoned, and they felt the first stirrings of resentment. It was a subtle thing at first. The early kings had accepted death willingly, seeing it as the natural end to a life well lived. But later kings began to cling to life longer, surrendering their sceptre when age and infirmity left them no choice. The ceremonies that had once honored death as a transition became rituals of mourning that lamented death as a tragedy. The Númenóreans began to build great tombs for their dead, as if by preserving the body, they could somehow preserve the spirit as well. They became obsessed with lengthening their lives through any means possible, seeking herbs and potions and magical arts that might stave off the inevitable. And all the while the shadow grew. Not a shadow from without, not yet, but a shadow from within. The shadow of fear and pride and discontent. The 11th king of Númenor was Tar-Minastir, and in his reign a great event that would have lasting consequences. Sauron, the servant of Morgoth who had survived the War of Wrath, had been rebuilding his power in Middle-earth for many centuries. He had taken a fair form and called himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and he had deceived the elven smiths of a region into helping him forge the rings of power. But his treachery was discovered, and war broke out between Sauron and the elves of Middle-earth. Sauron proved too powerful for the elves alone to defeat. His armies overran a region and threatened to destroy all the elven realms. Gil-galad, the High King, sent messengers to Númenor begging for aid. And Tar, minister honoring the ancient alliance, sent a great fleet to Middle-earth. The Númenor fleet landed on the shores of Middle-earth, and their armies disembarked in numbers beyond counting. Sauron, who had believed himself close to total victory, was utterly unprepared for such a force. The Númenor drove at his back, shattered his power, and forced him to flee to the east in humiliation. It was a complete and overwhelming victory, a demonstration of Númenor that made all the world tremble. And here, my friend, is where the story begins to darken in earnest. For the Númenor, who had saved Middle-earth from Sauron, looked upon the lands they had liberated and saw their richness. They saw forests of great timber and mountains of ore. They saw rivers teeming with fish and plains that could support vast herds. And they thought to themselves, why should we not have these things for ourselves? The Númenor began to build permanent settlements in Middle-earth, not merely havens for their sailors, but fortresses and cities. They demanded tribute from the lesser men who dwelt nearby. They cut down forests and mined mountains, and took whatever they desired. They were no longer the benevolent teachers who came bearing gifts. They had become conquerors and overlords, using their superior power to dominate all others. Not all Númenor approved of this change. There remained in Númenor a faction called the Faithful, those who held to the old ways and the old friendships. They maintained their alliance with the elves and their reverence for Ilar. They spoke against the pride and greed that were consuming their people. But their voices grew weaker with each passing generation, drowned out by those who called themselves the King's Men, those who believed that Númenor's power entitled them to take whatever they wished. The 13th King Tar-Atanama the Great was the first to openly refuse to surrender his life. He clung to his throne until he was old and withered, a shadow of his former self, driven mad by the fear of death. When he finally died, it was in senile misery, a pitiable end for one who had been so mighty. And this became the pattern for the kings who followed. Not a willing surrender to gift of men, but a desperate, futile struggle against the inevitable. The Númenor also began to turn away from the Elvish tongue, the language of ceremony and learning that had connected them to their past. They revived and elaborated the Adonaic tongue, the language of their mortal ancestors, and they used it increasingly for all purposes. This was no mere linguistic preference. It was a rejection of the elves and all they represented. It was a statement that Númenor no longer wished to be associated with the immortals who possessed what the Númenor could never have. Yet, even as they rejected the elves, the Númenor grew ever more obsessed with death. They built vast tombs and monuments to the dead. They developed elaborate rituals of embalming and preservation. They spent more time and treasure on their houses of the dead than on their houses of the living. It was a paradox, my friend, but one that made its own terrible censor. They could not accept death. And so they fixated upon it, trying through sheer effort of will and craft to somehow overcome what could not be overcome. And far away in Middle-earth, Sauron watched and waited and planned. He had been defeated, yes, but he was patient. He had seen the pride and fear that were consuming Númenor, and he knew these were weapons he could use. A people so afraid of death, so hungry for what they could not have, could be manipulated. They could be turned to his purposes. They could be made to destroy themselves. The 20th King of the Númenor was Ar-pharazon with him. The break with the past became complete. He was the first king to take his royal title in the Adonaic tongue, rather than the Elvish. A deliberate insult to the elves and a repudiation of Númenor's heritage. The name he chose, Adnachakor, means Lord of the West, a title that properly belonged only to Man, the elder king of the Valar. It was an act of breathtaking arrogance, a claim to divine status that would have horrified the early Númenor. Under Arnakr and his successors, the persecution of the faithful began in earnest. Those who maintained friendship with the elves, those who still spoke the Elvish tongue, those who still honored the Valar and kept the old ways, were marginalized and threatened. They were forbidden to speak Elvish publicly. They were excluded from positions of power and influence. The wise among them began to gather in the western parts of the island, away from the king's court, where they could practice in beliefs in relative safety. But even there, they were watched and mistrusted. The worship of El-Vater, the one god who had created the world, had always been simple in Enamaku, a pilgrimage to the summit of the Menotama 3 times a year, where the king would offer thanks on behalf of his people. No temple had ever been built, for the Endymenureans understood that Creator could not be confined to any structure made by hands. But now the pilgrimages grew less frequent and finally ceased altogether. The kings no longer wished to acknowledge any power than themselves. Meanwhile, the empire of Endymenor in Middle-earth continued to grow, but it had become an empire of exploitation and oppression. The Endymenureans demanded ever greater tribute from the men who lived under their dominion. They took slaves and sacrificed them to idols they had begun to worship, fell spirits and dark powers that promised what the Valar would not give. They became a terror to the peoples of Middle-earth, these descendants of heroes, these heirs of Beren and Tor. They became the thing they had once fought against. The 23rd king was Ar-Jimilza, and he was the cruelest and most oppressive yet. He forbade the elven ships from coming to Endymenor entirely. He made it a crime, punishable by death, to speak the elvish tongue. He removed the faithful from all positions of authority and forced them to the margins of society. And yet even he, in the end, could not escape the consequence of his bloodline. His wife, Inzilbethi, was of the faithful in secret, and she raised her son Zilon in the old ways, without his father's knowledge. When Ar-Jimilza died, Inziladin became king, and he took the elvish name Tar-Palanta, the far-sighted. He was the last king of Endymenor to turn back to the old ways. He reinstated the pilgrimages to the Menotama. He lifted the ban on the elvish tongue. He sought to make peace with the Eldor's friendship with the Valar. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The king's men, who held most of the power in Enmenor, despised him and resisted his reforms at every turn. The darkness that had taken root in the hearts of the Enmenoreans could not be so easily excised. Tar-Palanta had no son, only a daughter named Menuriel, who was beautiful and wise and should have been queen after him. But the law of Endymenor had been changed in darker days to favor male succession, and Tar-Palanta's nephew Pharazon was the nearest male heir. Pharazon was everything Tar-Palanta was not: proud, ambitious, hostile to the elves, contemptuous of the Valar. When Tar-Palanta died, Pharazon seized the throne and forced Menuriel to marry him against her will, taking her as his queen to legitimize his usurpation. He took the name ar-pharazon the Golden, and he would be the last king of Númenor. Ar-pharazon was the mightiest king Enmenor had ever known, mighty in his power and his folly. Under his rule, Númenor reached the height of its empire and the depth of its corruption. The Enmenorene fleets roamed all the seas of the world, extracting tribute from every land they touched. Gold and silver flowed into Armanellos in quantities that beggared imagination, but none of it brought the king what he truly desired: escape from death. Ar-pharazon grew ever more obsessed with his mortality. He surrounded himself with physicians and sorcerers who promised to extend his life. He consumed strange potions and underwent bizarre rituals. He searched for any secret, any power, that might grant him immortality. And always his gaze turned westward, toward the blessed realm, where the Valar and elves lived forever, where even the land itself was free from decay. Why, he demanded to know, should the Valar have what he could not? Why should the elves live forever while he, the mightiest king in the world, must die? The ban of the Valar was an injustice, he declared. It was a cruel restriction imposed by jealous powers who wished to keep the best things for themselves. Enmenor had the strength to challenge that ban. Númenor had the power to take what was being unfairly denied. It was at this moment, when ar-pharazon's pride and resentment reached their peak, that Sauron made his move. Sauron had been rebuilding his power in Mordor for many years. He had recovered the rings of power that had not been lost or hidden, and he wielded the One Ring, his master weapon, with terrible effect. He had conquered much of Middle-earth and threatened to dominate the rest. When ar-pharazon learned of Sauron's growing power, he was not frightened but angered. How dare this former servant of Morgoth set himself up as a king? How dare he claim dominion over lands that belongs to Númenor? Ar-pharazon assembled the greatest fleet that Númenor had ever produced, a fleet that darkened the seas and blotted out the sun. He sailed to Middle-earth with such overwhelming force that Sauron's armies took one look and fled. Sauron himself, cunning as ever, realized that he could not defeat Númenor by force of arms. Instead, he surrendered. Now here is the crucial moment, my friend, a moment when everything might have been different. Ar-pharazon had Sauron at his mercy. He could have executed the Dark Lord then and there, or at least imprisoned him forever. Instead, pride made him choose the worst possible option. He took Sauron back to Númenor as a trophy, a captive to demonstrate the supremacy of the Númenor king over all rivals. It was the greatest mistake any mortal has ever made. Sauron came to Númenor in chains, but the chains were a pretense. From the moment he set foot on the island, he began his real pain, the corruption of its people. He was fair to look upon in those days, still capable of wearing a form of beauty and majesty. He flattered and deceived and whispered. Within a few years, he had gone from prisoner to advisor, from advisor to high counselor, from high counselor to the power behind the throne. He told ar-pharazon what the king wanted, that the ban of the Valar was unjust, that Númenor had the right to take immortality by force, that the true god was not Iavatar or the Valar but Morgoth, the Dark Lord who had been cast into the void but who would one day return to reward his faithful servants. Under Sauron's influence, Númenor descended into absolute darkness. A great temple was built in Armanelos, a temple to Morgoth, and Sauron became its high priest. The white tree that had grown in the king's courts, the descendant of Telperion, was cut down and burned on Sauron's altar. Human sacrifice became common, with the faithful being particular targets. Blood flowed in the streets of what had once been the fairest city of men, offered up to a god of darkness who had long since been defeated. The faithful, those few who remained true, lived in constant fear. Many of them gathered in the port of Númenor on the eastern coast, as far from the king's madness as they could get. They built ships in secret and loaded them with treacherous seedlings of the rescued by Isildur, one of the leaders of the faithful. Before its destruction, Palantrin, the seeing stones that had been gifts from the elves, and records of all the learning and history of Númenor that they could preserve. They knew that catastrophe was coming. They prepared to flee. And then ar-pharazon, goaded by Sauron, made his final, fatal decision. He would break the ban of the Valar. He would sail west with all the might of Númenor and assault the blessed realm itself. He would take immortality by force of arms, and he would become as the Valar themselves, deathless and supreme. The fleet that ar-pharazon assembled was beyond anything that had ever been seen. The ships stretched from horizon to horizon, so numerous that they seemed to cover the entire sea. The warriors they carried were the flower of Númenor manhood, armed and armored with all the craft that centuries of development had produced. When this fleet set sail for the west, the heavens themselves seemed to tremble. The faithful watched from Númenor with despair. They knew that their countrymen were sailing to their doom. They knew that the Valar would not permit this sacrilege, and they knew that the wrath to come would fall not only on the guilty but on the innocent as well. Ar-pharazon and his fleet sailed west. They passed beyond the sight of Númenor into waters no mortal ship had ever crossed. They saw the shores of the blessed rising before them, beautiful beyond description, white shores and green hills, and the light of the trees that had been rekindled in that land. And ar-pharazon for one moment hesitated. The beauty before him stirred something in his heart, some memory of what his people had once been, some recognition of the enormity of what he was about to do. But only for a moment. Then he hardened his heart and ordered his armies to land. They set foot on the blessed realm, mortal men, armed for war, walking on sacred soil where they had been forbidden to tread. And in that instant, the Valar laid down their guardianship of the world and called upon Isildur, the Creator himself, to judge. The response were beyond anything that ar-pharazon could have imagined or feared. The world was changed forever and irrevocably. The flat earth was made round, bent like a bow, and the straight road to the blessed realm was removed from the circles of the world entirely. The blessed realm was lifted away, made inaccessible to all who sailed on mortal seas. And Númenor, the land of the star, the gift of the Valar to the Edain, was destroyed. The sea opened up and swallowed the fleet of ar-pharazon. Every ship, every warrior was dragged down into the abyss and badder falling mountains. Ar-pharazon himself and his mightiest soldiers, who had actually set foot on the blessed realm, were trapped there in the caves of the Forgotten, buried under fallen hills, where they will remain until the last battle at the end of the world. And then the wave came. It was a wave such as had never been seen and will never be seen again. It rose from the depths of the sea, towering to the heavens, and it swept across the ocean toward Númenor. Those who saw it coming had no time to flee. The wave struck the island with the force of a falling mountain. It shattered the great cities, leveled the towers, flooded the valleys. The Númenor, the highest peak, was submerged beneath the torrent. In a single day, everything that Númenor had built over 3,000 years was destroyed. The faithful in their ships at Númenor saw the wave coming and set sail before the wind. Some accounts say that Ilúvatar himself sent a great wind from the west to speed their flight, a final mercy for those who had remained true. The ships were hurled eastward at incredible speed, crossing in hours what normally took days, and they came to the shores of Númenor, earth even as Númenor was sinking beneath the waves behind them. When the survivors looked back, there was nothing to see. The land of the star was gone, swallowed by the sea as completely had never existed. Only the summit of the Númenor, some say, still rises above the waves somewhere in the deep ocean, though no mariner has ever found it. And the faithful wept for what was lost, not just their homeland, but an entire civilization, the greatest that men had ever built, destroyed by pride and folly and the manipulation of a dark lord who had calculated but of the catastrophe. Sauron was caught in the destruction. His physical body was destroyed when Númenor sank. But Sauron was a Maya, a spirit of great power, and his spirit fled back to Middle-earth. He could never again take a fair form, never again deceive through beauty. He rebuilt himself a body of dread and darkness, and he returned to Mordor to continue his war against the free peoples. But he had achieved much of what he set out to do. Númenor was destroyed. The mightiest kingdom of men was gone. The world itself was changed. The survivors of Númenor, the faithful who had escaped, came to Middle-earth as refugees. They had lost their homeland, their civilization, most of their people. But they had not lost their heritage or their hope. They still carried the blood of the Edain, strengthened by centuries of Númenor blessing. They still possessed great learning and craft. They still had the seedlings of the White Tree, and the Palantirai, and the records of their history. And they had leaders of courage and vision, Elendil the Tall, and his sons Isildur and Anrian. Elendil and his followers landed in the north of Middle-earth, in the region that would be called Arna. Isildur and Anrian landed in the south, where they founded the kingdom of Gondor. These realms in exile would carry on the legacy of Númenor, preserving its language and learning and traditions in a world that had been forever changed. The kingdoms that Elendil and his sons established were marvels in their own right. Arna in the north was vast, stretching from the Blue Mountains to the Misty Mountains. Its capital was Númenor, built on the shores of Lake Evendim, a fair city of white stone. Gondor in the south was even more magnificent. Its cities of Osgiliath, Minas Ithil, and Minas Anor were wonders of architecture and craft. The Dí Edain, as the survivors of Menor came to be called, brought to Middle-earth the skills and knowledge of their lost homeland, and they used these to create realms that, while never matching the glory of Númenor itself, were still far greater than anything else in Middle-earth. The Palantirai, the seeing stones, were distributed among the two kingdoms. These were crystal spheres that allowed communication across vast distances, and even the ability to see events in distant places. They were powerful tools of governance, allowing the kings to maintain contact with their far-flung territories and with each other. 7 stones there were, 3 north and 4 in the south. And until they were lost or fell into shadow, they served the Didi Nidain well. The seedling of the white tree was planted in Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, which was the dwelling of Isildur. It grew and flourished there, a living link to the trees of Valinor, a symbol of hope and legitimacy. As long as the white tree bloomed, the Didi Nidain believed their kingdoms would endure. And for many centuries it did bloom, and they did endure. But Sauron had not been destroyed. He was rebuilding his power in Mordor, gathering his forces, preparing for war. The Díndain knew that they would have to face him eventually. They knew that the malice of the Dark Lord, who had orchestrated the downfall of En-Menor, would not be content until they too were destroyed. The war came sooner than they expected. Sauron struck at Gondor before it was fully established, seeking to crush the exiles before they could grow strong. His armies assaulted Minas Ithil and captured it, claiming the city for himself and renaming it Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. But this was not the end. Elendil the North made alliance with Gil-galad, the High King of the Elves, and together they formed the last alliance of elves and men. The last alliance was the greatest military force that Middle-earth had ever seen, greater even than the host of ar-pharazon, for it combined the might of 2 peoples united in a common cause. They marched south, gathering strength as they went, and they came to Mordor and laid siege to Sauron's fortress of Barad-dûr. The siege lasted for 7 years. 7 years of bitter fighting, of countless battles before the Black Gate and on the slopes of Mount Doom. The losses were terrible on both sides, but the alliance held firm. At last, Sauron himself came forth to do battle, and the final confrontation took place on the slopes of Orodruin, the mountain of fire where the One Ring had been forged. In that final battle Gil-galad was slain and Elendil fell. The Elven King and the High King of Men both perished in the moment of victory, struck down by Sauron's hand. But Isildur, Elendil's son, took up his father's broken sword Narsil and cut the One Ring from Sauron's finger. Sauron's physical form was destroyed. His spirit fled, greatly diminished, and for a time, he was unable to take shape or act in the world. The war was over. The Dark Lord was defeated. But Isildur made a fateful choice. Instead of destroying the One Ring, as Arand and the Elven leaders urged him to do, he kept it. He claimed it as reward for his father's death, as an heirloom of his house. Perhaps he was already falling under its influence. Perhaps he simply did not understand how dangerous it was. Whatever his reasons, the ring was not destroyed, and Sauron, though defeated, was not truly vanquished. Isildur paid for his choice with his life. As he was journeying north to claim his father's kingdom in Arna, he was ambushed by orcs at the Gladden Fields. His company was overwhelmed, and Isildur attempted to escape by using the ring to make himself invisible. But the ring betrayed him. Slipping from his fingers, he swam across the river. Without its protection, Isildur was spotted by the orcs and slain. The ring was lost in the river, sinking into the mud of the river, where it remained for thousands of years. With Isildur's death, the kingdoms of the Didi Nidain entered a new phase of their history, a long, slow decline that would span many centuries. Arna in the north was weakened by Isildur's loss, and by the death of so many of its warriors in the war. It eventually split into 3 smaller kingdoms that quarreled among themselves and were eventually destroyed, one, by the Witch King of Angmar, the chief of Sauron's servants, who were themselves slowly recovering from their master's defeat. By the time of the current age, Arna is gone. Its cities are ruins, its people scattered. Only the Rangers of the North, the descendants of its kings, maintain any presence there, guarding the lands that were once their kingdom, and waiting for a day when their line might be restored. Gondor fared better, but it too declined. The line of Anrian ruled for many generations, but the blood of Endru-Menor grew thin, and the kings grew weaker. Plagues and invasions took their toll. The city of Osgiliath was ruined. The White Tree died and was not replaced for many years. Eventually, the line of kings failed entirely, and Gondor was ruled by stewards, capable administrators who governed in the name of kings who never returned. And yet, my friend, the story is not one of unrelieved decline. For even in the darkest times, the spirit of the Dí Nadain remained. They continued to fight against Sauron's servants. They continued to guard the west against invasion. They continued to preserve the learning and traditions of Enyumena. And the line of Isildur, though stripped of kingship, survived in the north, a hidden lineage waiting for its moment. The current chieftain of the Dí Nadain of the north is a young man named Aragorn, of whom you may have heard. He is the direct descendant of Isildur, and through Isildur of Elendil, and through Elendil of all the kings of Númenor back to Eros himself, who was the son of Eärendil, who was the son of Tuor and Edril, who bore the blood of the three houses of the Edain and of the elves and even of the Maiar. In Aragorn is concentrated the heritage of all the great lineages of men and elves, a heritage that has been preserved through 1,000 years of hardship and loss. Whether Aragorn will ever claim the throne of Gondor, whether the kingdoms of the Dí Nadain will ever be restored, I cannot say. The future is not mine to see, and prophecy is a treacherous art. But I can tell you that the blood of Emena still flows, that the hope of the Dí Nadain is not yet extinguished, and that the story of men in Middle-earth is far from over. But let me speak also of other men, for the Dí Nadain, though the greatest, are not the only people of importance in Middle-earth. There are many other kindreds, many other stories, many other threads in the great tapestry. In the north, beyond the ancient boundaries of Arna, dwell the men of Dale and Esgaroth, a hardy people who live in the shadow of the lonely mountain. They are descendants of the Northmen, those men who did not journey to Enyumena in the Second Age, but who nonetheless remained free from the shadow and maintained ship with the elves and the dwarves. The dragon Smog destroyed the kingdom of Dale long ago, but the people survived, living on the long lake in the town of Esgaroth. They are brave and resourceful, and their story too is not yet finished. To the south of the Dí Nadain lies Rohan, the land of the horse lords. The Rohirrim are also descended from the Northmen, from a branch that migrated to the plains north of Gondor many centuries ago. They were granted their land by the steward of Gondor in recognition of their aid against common enemies, and they have been steadfast allies of Gondor ever since. They are a proud and noble people, the finest horsemen in Middle-earth, and their songs and traditions preserve a culture of remarkable beauty and strength. The Rohirrim remember their origins in the north, and they maintain many customs that have been lost elsewhere. Their language is related to that of the ancient Northmen, different from the common speech that most of Middle-earth now uses. Their songs speak of heroes and battles from ages past, and they honor their horses as partners and friends, not merely as beasts of burden. A Rohirrim without his horse is only half a man, they say, and there is truth in the jest. I have had dealings with the Rohirrim over the years, and I have found them to be everything the reputation suggests: brave, loyal, straightforward in their dealings. They do not have the learning or the craft of the Dí Nadain, but they have virtues of their own that are equally valuable. In the struggles that lie ahead, they will have a part to play. Far to the south and east are other peoples of men, many of whom have fallen under Sauron's influence over the centuries. The Haradrim of the southern deserts, the Easterlings from the lands beyond the Sea of Arun, and many others have become enemies of Gondor and of all the free peoples. But even among them, I suspect, there are those who serve the Dark Lord unwillingly, who fight because they have been deceived or coursed, or simply because they see no alternative. I have lived long enough to know that evil can arise in any people, but so can good. The men who fight for Sauron are not all irredeemably lost. Some might yet be reclaimed, if the opportunity were offered, and if the war ends in a way that makes such reclamation possible. The men of Gondor today are a diminished people compared to their ancestors, but they retain much that is worthy of admiration. The tower guard of Minas Tirith, the White City, are perhaps the finest soldiers in Middle-earth, disciplined and courageous. The scholars of Gondor preserve libraries of ancient lore that would be lost otherwise. The stone crafters and builders' main skills that have been passed down for countless generations. Gondor may be past its greatest glory, but it is still a bulwark against the darkness, still a beacon of civilization in a world that grows ever more dangerous. The current steward of Gondor is Denethor, a man of great ability and greater pride. He is proud of his lineage, which is nearly as ancient and noble as the line of the Kims themselves. He is proud of his wisdom, which is considerable, and of his will, which is iron. But pride, as the history of Númenor shows, can be a dangerous quality. Pride can make a man unwilling to accept help. Pride can make a man blind to his own weaknesses. I have concerns about Denethor, concerns that I hope will prove unfounded, but which gnaw at me nonetheless. Denethor has 2 sons, Boromir and Faramir. I have met them both, and they are worthy men, each in his own way. Boromir is a warrior born, brave and strong, the idol of Gondor's soldiers. Faramir is more scholarly, more thoughtful, with a love of lore and history that his father somewhat disdains. The 2 brothers love each other dearly, which is a credit to them both. But I sense that Denethor favors Boromir, and I wonder what effect this will have on Faramir in the long run. Such things can shape a man's destiny in unexpected ways. The future of men, my friend, is uncertain. Sauron is regaining his strength, gathering his forces for a final assault on the Free Peoples. If he recovers the One Ring, which still exists somewhere in the world, his victory will be complete. All the realms of men and elves will fall before him. The darkness that consumed Númenor will spread across all of Middle-earth, and there will be no escape, no refuge, nowhere to flee. But if Sauron can be defeated, if the ring can be destroyed, then the age of men will truly begin. The elves are leaving Mid-earth, passing over the sea to the Blessed Realm. The dwarves are dwindling, retreating to their deepest halls. The other elder peoples are fading away. When the struggle against Sauron is resolved, one way or another, it will be men who inherit the world. It will be men who shape what comes next. This is fitting, I think. Men were always destined for dominion over Middle-earth. They were always meant to take up the world when the elder peoples departed. Their mortality, which they so often see as a curse, is actually what makes them suited for this role. They can change in ways that the immortal elves cannot. They can adapt, can grow, can build something new in every generation. The elves look backward to the beauty that was lost. Men can look forward to the beauty that might yet be created. The great tragedy of Númenor was that its people forgot this. They became so obsessed with escaping death that they lost sight of what makes mortal life valuable. They wanted to be like the elves, immortal and unchanging, and in reaching for what they could not have, they destroyed what they did have. They had been given the greatest gift any men had ever received: long life, wisdom, craft, power. And they threw it all away because it was not enough, because they wanted more. Let that be a lesson, my friend. Let that be something you carry with you always. The desire for more, the refusal to accept limits, the conviction that you deserve what others have, these are the seeds of destruction. Contentment is not weakness. Acceptance is not surrender. There is wisdom in recognizing what you are and what you have, in finding joy in your nature rather than always reaching for another's. Men are mortal. This is their nature, given to them by the Creator himself. And mortality is not a punishment or a curse. It is a gift, though a gift that is hard to appreciate. Mortal life has a sweetness that eternal life cannot match. Every moment matters when moments are finite. Every choice carries weight when choices cannot be undone forever. Every love is precious when those we love will someday be gone. The elves envy men, though men rarely believe this. The elves have seen friends die and pass beyond the world to unknown destinations. They have watched mortals face death with courage and even joy, freed from the weariness that weighs upon immortal hearts. Some elves wonder what lies beyond the circles of the world. What the gift of men actually grants they will never know. Only men will ever know. As I sit here with you in this pleasant hole, with the fire crackling and the night pressing against the windows, I think about all of the men I have known over the long years of my wandering. Kings and commoners, heroes and villains, the wise and the foolish. I have seen the best and worst of what men can be. And despite all the darkness, despite all the failures, I have never lost my faith in this people. Men are capable of terrible evil, yes. The history of Númenor proves that beyond any doubt. But men are also capable of extraordinary good. The courage of Beren, walking into Angband to steal a Silmaril. The sacrifice of Finrod, dying to save a mortal friend. The love of Elthine, choosing mortality for the sake of the one she loved. The faithfulness of those who preserved the old ways through centuries of persecution. The hope of the Dyrd and Nadain, maintained to thousands of years of exile. These two are what men can be. These two are part of the story. And you, my friend, sitting here in your comfortable home in the Shire, you are also part of the story. Hobbits are related to men. Did you know that? You are a branch of the same tree, though you diverged so long ago that the connection is all but forgotten. The courage that occasionally surfaces in hobbits. The unexpected heroism that appears at crucial moments. This is the heritage you share with the great heroes of the Edain. Do not underestimate yourself or your people. When the moment comes, when courage is needed, you may find that you have more of it than you ever imagined. The night grows later, and even I feel the weight of all these words. I have told you of the origins of men and their journey westward. I have told you the great heroes of the First Age and their deeds against Morgoth. I have told you of the rise and fall of Númenor, the greatest kingdom of men and the most tragic. I have told you of the kingdoms in exile and their long decline. I have told of the other peoples of men scattered across Middle-earth. And I have tried to tell you something of the nature of men themselves, their strengths and their weaknesses, their glory and their shame. But the story is not finished. The story is never finished as long as there are men to continue it. The age of men is coming, for good or ill. What that age will look like depends on the choices that men make, the choices that all of us make in the days ahead. Sauron must be faced, the ring must be dealt with, the darkness must be confronted, and in that confrontation, the fate of men, the fate of all the free peoples will be decided. I cannot tell you how it will end. I do not know. But I have hope. I have always had hope, and that hope is based, more than anything else, on what I have seen men become when they are at their best. The fire burns low, and my throat is dry from all this talking. Perhaps it is time to rest. But before we part for the night, let me leave you with this thought. The glory of men is not in their power, or their longevity, or their craft. The glory of men is in their capacity for growth, for change, for redemption. A man who falls can rise again. A man who fails can try again. A man who despairs can find hope again. This is what mortality builds, the ability to begin anew, to become something different from what you were. The elves are bound by their past. Men are freed by their future. Remember the story of Númenor, my friend. Remember its glory and its tragedy. Remember what happens when men reach for what they cannot have, and forget to appreciate what they do have. But remember also the courage and the love and the hope that shine through even in the darkest parts of that tale. Remember that the faithful survived, that the line of arrows continues, that the kingdoms of the Dyrd and Nadain still stand against the shadow. The night is dark, yes, but the dawn will come. It always comes. And when it does, men will be there to greet it, as they have always been, since the first sun rose over a world still young. Now, where did I put my pipe? Ah, there it is. But that is another matter. The tale is told. The fire is fading, and we both need our rest. Tomorrow brings its own challenges, its own stories. Tonight, let the old stories settle into your heart, and perhaps when time comes for you to play your own part in the great tale, you will find that the wisdom of the past guides you truly. Good night, my friend. Sleep well, and remember, even the smallest person can change the course of the future. This is the lesson that hobbits have taught me, and it is a lesson that applies to all the peoples of Middle-earth, great and small alike. The story of men continues, and who knows, Perhaps the greatest chapters are yet to be written. Yes, the greatest chapters are yet to be written. I believe that. I have always believed that. And as long as there is one heart that hopes, one hand that fights for what is right, one voice that speaks truth in the darkness, the story will continue. This is the gift of not immortality, but the capacity to give meaning to mortality, to make every breath count, to make every choice matter, to build something that endures in the hearts of those who come after, even if the builders themselves pass beyond the circles of the world. And Númenor fell, yes, but Númenor also gave rise to Gandalf. The kings failed, yes, but the deed in the Dane endure. Sauron destroyed much, yes, but he did not destroy everything. He could not destroy hope. He could not destroy love. He could not destroy the stubborn courage that refuses to surrender even when all seems lost. This is what I have learned from my time among men. This is what I carry with me through all my wanderings. And this is what I offer to you now, as the fire dies and the darkness gathers hope. Always hope. Even at the end of all things, hope. The story of men is a story of hope against despair, of light against darkness, of love against hate. And that story will continue as long as there are men to tell it, men to live it, men to believe in it. So do not despair, my friend. Whatever darkness lies ahead, whatever trials await, remember that you are part of a story that stretches back to the beginning of days and forward to the end of time. You are connected to Beren and Elruthine, to Tur and Idril, to Elendil and Isildur, to all the heroes and all the ordinary folk who have carried this story forward through the ages. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And as long as the story continues, you never will be. This is the gift. This is the glory. This is of men. The race of men and beyond. And now truly I must rest. My old bones are weary and my voice is hoarse. But I am glad we had this time together. I am glad I could share these tales with you. They are worth sharing. They are worth remembering. They are worth carrying forward into whatever future awaits. May the stars shine upon your path, my friend. May the road rise to meet your feet. And may you find, when your own story reaches its end, that you have lived it well, loved deeply, and left the world a little brighter for your passing. This is all any of us can hope for. This is all any of us can strive for. And it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Good night. And remember, the dawn will come. It always comes. The dawn will come. Even the darkest times, when all seems lost, when hope itself seems foolish and despair seems the only reasonable response, the dawn will come. This is the promise that into the fabric of the world when it was first created. This is the truth that underlies all the stories I have told you tonight. The darkness is real. The struggle is real. The losses and the sorrows are real. But they are not the end. They are never the end. Men have known this in their hearts, since the first of them opened their eyes to the rising sun. That first dawn, after the long darkness that preceded it, must have seemed like a miracle. And every dawn since has been a reminder of that first miracle, a renewal of the promise that light will always follow darkness, that hope will always follow despair. The Indan men Moreens forgot this. In the end, they became so focused on their own mortality, so afraid of the darkness that waited for them personally, that they lost sight of the larger truth. They wanted to escape death entirely, to live forever in the light. But in reaching for that impossible goal, they brought about the very darkness they feared. They made themselves into the darkness. Do not make their mistake, my friend. Accept what you are. Accept your place in the great story. Accept that your time is limited and your power is finite. And then live fully, love deeply, fight bravely, hope stubbornly. This is what men were made to do. This is what men do best. The elves preserve, the dwarves endure, but men live. Men throw themselves into life with an intensity that astonishes the elder peoples. Men love and fight and create and destroy and mourn and celebrate with a passion that the immortals can scarcely comprehend. This passion is born of mortality. It is the gift within the gift. It is what makes mortal life, brief as it is, worth living. I have seen this passion in the great heroes I have spoken of tonight. Beren's determination to win Eleuthean despite all obstacles. Tor's willingness to journey into the unknown on the word of a vision. Rendell's courage in sailing to the ends of the earth to plead for aid. Lendel's resolution to rebuild after the catastrophe of Númenor. These were not cold calculations or dutiful obligations. These were acts of passion, of love, of burning commitment to something greater than themselves. And I have seen this same passion in ordinary men as well. In farmers who defend their fields at raiders they cannot hope to defeat. In mothers who protect their children with nothing, with their bodies and their will. In craftsmen who pour their hearts into their work, knowing that they will not live to see its full flowering. In friends who sacrifice everything for each other without a moment's hesitation. This is the glory of men. Not the power of Númenor at its height, though that was real. Not the wisdom of the great kings, though that was real as well. But this, the capacity for passionate commitment to life and love, and hope even in the face of death, even in the shadow of despair. I have wandered this world for more years than you can easily imagine, my friend. I have seen kingdoms rise and fall. I have watched civilizations bloom and wither. I have witnessed triumphs that made the heavens ring, and tragedies that made the stars weep. And through all of it, I have been sustained by this simple truth. The glory of creation lies not in its permanence, but in its beauty, not in its duration, but in its intensity. A flower that blooms for a single day can hold more beauty than a mountain that endures for millennia. A life that spans a few decades can hold more meaning than an existence that stretches across ages. It is not how long you live, but how well you live, how deeply you love, how bravely you face the challenges that come your way. The Númenorians, at their best, understood this. They built beautiful cities and created magnificent works of art not because they thought these things would last forever, because beauty itself is valuable, because the act of creation is its own reward. They explored the seas and expanded the boundaries of knowledge, not because they would be around to see the ultimate fruits of discoveries, but because exploration and discovery are good in themselves. They fought against Sauron not because they thought they could guarantee victory for all time, but because fighting against darkness is what the children of light are meant to do. It was only when they forgot these truths, only when they became obsessed with permanence and survival and the avoidance of death, that they lost their way. The tragedy of Númenor is not that it was destroyed, but that it destroyed itself. The people who built the greatest civilization of men were the same people who tore it down. The wisdom that raised them up was the same wisdom that, twisted by fear, brought them low. Let this be your lesson, my friend. This be what you take from all the stories I have told you tonight. Life is short, death is certain. And this is exactly as it should be. Do not waste your time fearing the inevitable. Do not corrupt your spirit by grasping for what cannot be held. Instead, embrace the life you have been given. Find joy in the simple things, in friendship and fellowship, in good food and warm fires, in the beauty of the world around you. Fight for what is right. Not because you will certainly win, but because fighting for what is right is its own victory. Love with all your heart. Not because love will last forever, but because love that does not hold back is the truest kind of love. These are the lessons of Númenor. These are the lessons of the history of men. And these are the lessons I offer to you as the night reaches its deepest hour and the fire sinks to embers. The dawn is coming, my friend. The dawn is always coming, and when it arrives, you will have the chance to begin again, to write another page in the great story, to add your voice to the chorus that has been singing since the world was young. What will you do with that chance? What story will you tell with the life you have been given? I cannot answer that for you. No one can. It is your choice to make, your story to tell. But I have faith in you. I have faith in all the peoples of Middle-earth who have not surrendered to the darkness. And I have faith that, whatever challenges lie ahead, there will always be those who rise to meet them, who carry the light forward, who refuse to let hope die. The story of men continues. Númenor is gone, but its legacy lives on. The kingdoms are diminished, but they still stand. The darkness gathers, but the light has not been extinguished. And as long as there are men who remember the glory of their ancestors and aspire to match it, as long as there are men who love life and fear no death, as long as there are men who hope when hope seems foolish, the story will continue. This is my message to you, my friend. This is what I have learned from all my years of walking among men. This is what I believe with all my heart. The story continues. It always continues. And the best chapters are yet to come. Now rest. Let the stories settle into your dreams. And when you wake, remember that you are part of something larger than yourself. Something that stretches back to the beginning and forward to the end. Something that gives meaning to every moment you live and every choice you make. You are part of the great story. Act according. Good night. And blessed be your waking. The tale of men is long, and I have told only a portion of it tonight. There are so many other stories, so many other heroes, so many other moments of Dorian tragedy that I could relate. But a single night cannot hold them all, and even my voice must eventually fall silent. Let me speak briefly, then, of a few more matters before I truly finish. Let me tug some threads that I have not yet woven into the tapestry. The gifts that the Númenor brought to Middle-earth did not vanish with the fall of their empire. The men of Middle-earth learned from them carried that learning forward, generation after generation. The craft of building in stone, the art of forging steel, the wisdom of healing agriculture and aggregation. All of these were gifts that the Númenor gave. And all of these are still practiced today by peoples who may not even remember where their skills originated. In a sense, the Númenor did not entirely die. Its physical form was destroyed, yes. Its cities are beneath the waves, its towers are rubble on the ocean floor, its people are scattered or perished. But its spirit lives on whenever a healer uses the old techniques to save a life, whenever a builder raises a wall using methods perfected in Armanellos, whenever a captain navigates by the stars using knowledge first compiled by Númenor astronomers. This is a kind of immortality, my friend, not the immortality of the elves, which is the continuation of the same individual through endless years, but a different kind, perhaps a better kind, the immortality of influence, of legacy, of gifts given that continue to give long after the giver is gone. The Númenor who shared their knowledge with the lesser men of Middle-earth did not know that their own civilization would one day be destroyed. They shared freely, expecting nothing in return. And because of their generosity, something of Númenor survives even now, thousands of years after the wave. Is this not a lesson in itself? The Númenor who hoarded their gifts, who used their power only for domination and exploitation, left nothing behind but bitter memories. But those who gave freely, who taught and healed and helped without counting the cost, they left a legacy that endures. Generosity is its own reward, yes, but it is also, in a way, a kind of immortality. The good we do lives after us in ways we cannot predict or control. I think also of the relationship between men and elves and how it has changed over the long ages. In the beginning in Beleriand, the two peoples were close allies, fighting side by side against Morgoth, intermarrying in some cases, sharing knowledge and culture freely. The great heroes of the Edain, like Beren and Tor, were embraced by the elves as equals or near equals, and the children of those unions, the half-elven, bridged the two peoples in ways that had never been bridged before. But as time went on, the peoples grew apart. The Númenor, in their pride, began to look down upon the elves, resenting their immortality even as they coveted it. The elves, for their part, grew wary of the changes they saw in their mortal friends, the darkening of spirit and the hunger for what could not be had. By the time Númenor fell, the old alliance had already been badly damaged, and only the faithful maintained the ancient friendship. After the fall, the survivors worked to rebuild that friendship. Elendil and Gellert forged the last alliance together, elf and man fighting side by side once more against the darkness. And that alliance achieved what neither people could have achieved alone. The defeat of Sauron, at least for a time. But the cost was terrible, and when it was over, both peoples were diminished. The O's began their long withdrawal from Middle-earth, and the men were left to face the future largely on their own. Today, the relationship between men and elves is distant but not hostile. The Dee Ned in the north, the Nortain friendship with Urin's household in Rivendell. The men of Gundor have dealings with the Lothlorien, though they are more distant. But the intimacy of the elder days is gone, and it will not return. The time of the elves is ending, and they know it. They are preparing to leave Middle-earth forever, to pass over the sea to the blessed realm where their kindred await them. When they are gone, men will be alone in the world. This is not a tragedy, my friend. It is simply the way of things. The world changes, and we must change with it. The elves have played their part in the great story, and their part is coming to an end. Now it is the turn of men to take up the burden and the glory of shaping Middle-earth's future. This is their destiny. This is what they were made for, and they will rise to it, I believe. They have it in them to create wonders beyond anything the elves ever imagined, if they can find the wisdom to avoid the mistakes of the past. The key, as always, is balance. The Númenorians lost their balance. They had power but not wisdom. They had knowledge but not humility. They had ambition but not restraint. The men who come after them must learn from their example. They must pursue greatness without falling into arrogance. They must seek to improve their lot without despising what they already have. They must honor the past without being trapped by it, and embrace the future without forgetting where they came from. This is not easy. It has never been easy, but it is possible. I have seen it done. I have seen men who embodied the best of their people, who were brave without being reckless, wise without being cold, ambitious without being greedy, humble without being weak. These men exist. They have always existed, and they will continue to exist as long as there are men in the world. The darkness that threatens Middle-earth today is great, perhaps greater than any since the fall of Númenor. Sauron is rebuilding his power, his servants are active in every land. The free peoples are divided and weakened. But I do not despair, I cannot despair, because I have seen what men can do when they are pushed to their limits. I have seen the courage that lies hidden in the most unlikely hearts. And I know that, however dark the night becomes, the dawn will come. This is my faith. This is what sustains me, and this is what I offer to you as the last embers of the fire fade and the deepest hour of the night settles over us. Believe in the dawn. Believe in the capacity of men to overcome their weaknesses and rise to their strengths. Believe in the power of hope, even when hope seems foolish. Believe in love, even when love seems powerless. Believe in the good that exists in every heart, even when that good is buried under layers of fear and selfishness and pain. These beliefs may not seem like much in the face of the darkness that confronts us, but they are everything. They are the foundation upon which all resistance to evil is built. They are the source from which all courage flows. Without them, we would have surrendered to despair long ago, and the darkness would already have won. So hold on to them, my friend. Hold on to them with all your strength, and when the time comes for you to act, when the great story calls upon you to play your part, let these beliefs guide you. They will not fail you. They have never failed anyone who held them true. The story of men is a story of faith, faith in themselves, faith in each other, faith in the ultimate triumph of good over evil. This faith has been tested again and again through all the ages of the world. It has been tested by the malice of Morgoth and the cunning of Sauron. It has been tested by the weakness and folly of men themselves. But it has never been extinguished. It burns still in the hearts of all who refuse to surrender to the darkness. Let it burn your heart as well. Let it light your way through the dark places that lie ahead. And when you pass it on to those who come after you, as you must, let it burn even brighter in their hearts than it burned in yours. This is how we win, my friend, not through force of arms alone, though arms are necessary, not through wisdom alone, though wit is essential, but through faith, through hope, through the stubborn refusal to believe that darkness is the final word. The story of men continues, and I have faith that its best chapters are yet to be written. Now I truly must rest. My voice is gone, and my eyes are heavy, and even a wizard needs his sleep. But I am glad we had this time together. I am glad I could share these stories with you, and I hope that, when you think back on this night in years to come, you will remember not just the tales of glory and tragedy, but also the message that underlies them all: hope. Always hope. Even at the end of all things. Hope. The dawn is coming. Sleep now and dream of light. Good night, my dear friend. Good night. But wait. Before sleep takes us both, let me say one more thing. One more thought that has been growing in my mind as I have spoken to you tonight. The story of Númenor is often told as a warning, and rightly so. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and the folly of grasping for what cannot be held. But it is also, if you look at it from another angle, a story of hope, a story of survival, a story of how even the greatest catastrophe cannot destroy everything, how even the most complete defeat contain within it the seeds of future victory. Consider, when the wave fell upon Númenor, it seemed like the end of everything. 3,000 years of civilization, the mightiest kingdom men had ever built, was wiped out in a single day. The population of the island, hundreds of thousands of people, perished almost entirely. The cities, the gardens, the libraries, the temples, all gone, swallowed by the sea without a trace. And yet 9 ships escaped. 9 ships, out of all the great fleets of Númenor. A tiny remnant, a handful of survivors, carrying with them a few treasures and a great deal of grief. It would have been easy for them to despair. It would have been easy for them to give up, to settle in some quiet corner of Middle-earth and live out their days in obscurity, letting the legacy of Númenor fade into forgotten legend. But they did not despair. They did not give up. Elendil and his sons looked upon the devastation of their people, and they chose hope. They chose to rebuild. They chose to carry on the best of what Númenor had been, while leaving behind the worst. They founded kingdoms that would endure for thousands of years. They preserved the learning and the language and the traditions of their ancestors. They kept the flame alive. This, my friend, is the true message of Númenor. Not just that pride goes before a fall, though that is true, but also that after the fall, there can be a rising, that destruction is not the end, that a faithful remnant can preserve what matters and build something new from the ruins. The faithful knew this. That is why they are called the faithful. Not because they had blind faith that everything would work out. Not because they naively believed that nothing bad could happen to them. But because they held faith with the old truths, even when those truths were mocked and persecuted. They remained faithful to their beliefs about what was right and good, even when faithfulness brought them nothing but suffering. And in the end, their faithfulness was rewarded, not with a return to old glory, but with a chance to begin again, to build something new. Is this not the pattern of all history? The rise and fall of powers, the destruction and rebuilding, the endings that turn out to be beginnings. Nothing lasts forever in Middle-earth, save the love of those who refuse to stop loving. But from every ending, something new can emerge. From every death, new life can spring. The elves understand this differently than men do. For the elves, the pattern is one of fading, of gradual diminishment, of slow retreat from a world that is passing out of their keeping. They do not experience the sharp breaks, the catastrophic endings that punctuate the history of men. Instead, they experience a long, drawn-out farewell, a gentle letting go of things they have for thousands of years. Men experience the pattern more intensely. For men, endings are real endings: death, destruction, the complete cessation of what was. But for men, beginnings are also beginnings: birth, creation, the emergence of something genuinely new. The elves can only preserve and remember. Men can also create, innovate. This is the balance, this is the trade-off, and in its own way, it is fair. The survivors of Númenor carried within them the blood of kings and queens, of heroes and sages, of all the generations that had lived on the blessed island since Eros first raised the standard of the star. That blood did not disappear when the island sank. It continued, in the vines of the refugees, and through them it passed to their children and their children's children, and all the generations that followed. Today, that blood still flows. It flows in the DD Nedane of the north, the rangers who guard the borders of lands that have forgotten them. It flows in the lords of Gondor, the stewards and captains that hold the line against the darkness in the south. It flows, thin but not extinguished, in countless ordinary folk scattered across Middle-earth, people who may not even know that they carry within the heritage of the greatest civilization men have ever known. And one day, if the stories are true, if the prophecies are fulfilled, that blood will rise again to claim its inheritance. One day, a king will return to Gondor, a descendant of Isildur who will the divided kingdoms and restore the glory of the Deed of Nedane. One day, the promise that was made when Elendil first set foot on Middle-earth will be fulfilled, and the Lion of Ender Menno will once again rule over a realm of peace and justice. I do not know if I will live to see that day. I do not know if you will live to see it. But I believe it will come. I believe the faithfulness of the faithful, maintained through all these long centuries of exile and diminishment, will ultimately be rewarded. I believe that the story of Amenna is not yet finished, that its final chapter is still to be written. And when that chapter is written, it will not be a chapter of destruction but of redemption, not a chapter of despair but hope. It will show that the gift of men, the ability to begin again, to change, to grow, to become something new, is the greatest gift of all. It will show that even the deepest fall can be followed by a rising, that even the darkest night can end in dawn. This is my hope, this is my faith, and this is what I leave with you tonight, as the fire dies and sleep claims us both. The story continues, the best is yet to come, and whatever darkness lies between here and there, we will face it together, and we will overcome it, because that is what the free peoples of Middle-earth do. That is what men do. That is what we were made to do. Remember Ender Menno. Remember its glory and its tragedy. Remember its pride and its fall. But remember also its faithful remnant, its ships sailing eastward before the storm, its kings who chose to begin again rather than surrender to despair. Remember and take heart. The dawn is coming, it is always coming, and it will be glorious. Now truly, finally, irrevocably, I must sleep. My old bones demand it, and even wizards must obey such demands eventually. Dream well, my friend. Dream of star ships and cities of white stone. Dream of heroes and lovers and kings who kept faith with the good. Dream of the dawn that is coming, and the glory that awaits. And when you wake, carry those dreams with you into the day. Let them light your path and warm your heart and strengthen your resolve. For you are part of the story now. You have heard the tale of Ender Menno, and it has become part of you. And what you do with that tale, how you let it shape your choices and your actions, is now part of the story too. Write your chapter well, my friend. Make it a chapter worthy of the heroes who came before. Make it a chapter that those who come after will be proud to remember. The story of men continues. Your part in it begins now. Good night. And may the stars shine upon your journey, wherever it may lead. The end, or rather not the end at all, merely a pause, a rest between verses in the endless song of Middle-earth. Tomorrow the song will resume, with new verses and new harmonies, new themes woven into the ancient melodies. Sleep now, dream, and wake to meet whatever tomorrow brings. Good night, my dear friend, good night.